Friends, welcome. Hello. Today I wanted to talk about a very interesting topic, and it's about indoctrination and brainwashing. My name is Petra Deeter. I meant to do this 2 days ago, but I was not able to do it then. So we are here today, and I hope that this is okay with you guys in terms of timing. Now, I thought this is a very important topic for us to talk about because indoctrination and brainwashing is something that has been studied very well in the field of cultic culture, right? So if we look at parental alienation as a form of a cult, and there's a lot of similarity, and actually there's an interview that I did, if you guys watch the interview that I did with Yanya Lilich, Dr. Lalich, she's actually an expert in the field of cult culture. You will see that there's a lot of parallels or characteristic of parental alienation that can be seen as a cult. So I thought it would be very important for us, in order to understand parental alienation and understand how to rescue your children from parental alienation, is to understand the social psychology and the dynamic of cults. Please let me know if you guys can hear me okay. I want to make sure that we don't have any technical problem, and then you won't be able to hear me. I know I'm sometimes have that problem. Actually, yeah, so let me know if you can hear me, and I would love to know where you guys calling in from. Okay, Rio, thank you so much. Okay, so there are 5 particular publications that I want to talk to you guys today about. And thank you so much, Lisa. Great. Okay, where are you guys calling in from? I know Rio is from Los Angeles. Lisa, I know you've seen you all the time. Barbara, hi, thank you so much. Okay, so there are 5 publications that I want to talk to you guys about. So I wanted to make sure you guys know that the work that we do here, we always go back to science. We always wanted to understand things from a very scientific standpoint, so we don't just kind of make up information. So let me see how I can share the screen to show you guys 5 publications that we are going, 5 research study that we're going to talk about today that I thought is very relevant to I'm sorry, I think I have some problem with my screen share, so give me a second. I want to make sure that I have the right screen. But these are, I thought is so relevant to what we are dealing with, and so it's so important for us to study it. Where am I? Okay, share screen. I don't see it. Where did it go? I had it. Okay, it's here. Is it here? Okay, I think it's this one. Okay, right. So this is one of the publications that I wanted to share with you guys. This is an academic paper. Oh, Lisa's from Denver. Hi. I was thinking of going to Denver in a week for a few things, but actually I'm not going, but that's cool. And then Barbara is using closed captioning. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that you can actually use that and it's working. I'm so glad. Okay, so this is one of the paper that I thought is very interesting by Dr. Jenkinson. She's also one of the leading experts in the field of cultic culture. And she wrote this particular paper about living psychologically. So talking about when a cult member leave a cult, in order to have a cult member leave the cult, you need to be able to get that member leaving physically, but you also need the member to leave psychologically. So you need to make sure that you get the mind of that member. So it's the same with your child, right? You sometimes, and we have this situation a lot, where sometimes parents would go to court and be able to win custody and have their children, but psychologically, the children are still trapped. and influenced by the alienators in here in their mind. And so therefore you don't actually get the children yet. You haven't got the children to be free yet. And so this particular paper, and we'll go into detail in a little bit, but this particular paper is talking about how like what she's talking about, a concept that is called confluential trance, and the dynamic in the cult, regarding the psychology, the social psychology in a cult, regarding the cult member. And I thought it's very much parallel to the social dynamics in parental alienation. So that's one of the publications that we're going to be talking about. Another one is called Freedom of Mind. This is a book, and this book by Dr. Hassan, which is also another leader in the field of cultic culture. And in this one, he's talking about, how to help loved one living, controlling people and cults and beliefs and things like that. And it's very much, again, like I mentioned, there's going to be two things that we're going to talk about from this book that I thought was very important. One is what he called the bite models, which is the controlling model that people use in cults, which happen to be really the same thing that alienators use in parental alienation. And then another thing that he's talking about, which is fear induction, which I thought also is very relevant to parental alienation. I saw Paula said Steve Hassan is great. Yeah, thank you. Yes, I agree. It's such a great book. Another book that we're going to talk about is called Helplessness, on depression, development, and death. So this book talks about the concept of learned helplessness, and by Dr. Selgman. And so in here, we're going to talk a little about, learned self-helplessness, and how in, for example, the situation of parental alienation, your child, sometimes, and we have children, even like adult children that grown beyond the age of adulthood, and they still stuck with the alienator. So even though they're not physically trapped, they're not being chained up, they're not being locked up in a place, but they are still not breaking out of that control because of this concept of learned helplessness. And this is why I thought these are kind of relevant concepts that I wanted to talk about. Another one is called theory of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance, I thought, is also an important social psychology in toxic controlling environment like parental alienation or in courts. Okay, another book that I wanted to mention is Influence. This book is such a great book by Dr. Cialdini. And this book talk about the psychology of persuasion, which is something that is also being used in parental alienation as well as in court. So these are the five publications that we're going to be talking about, and we'll go into them in details in a minute. Let me know if you guys have any questions. And I'm curious, do you guys agree with the idea that parental alienation is very much like a cult? I strongly feel like there's a strong parallel, or in fact, I feel like it can be argued that parental alienation is characterized as a cult and should be characterized as a cult. And the importance of seeing the parallels is so that we can understand the complex and challenging dynamics in parental alienation, because if we can recognize that, and there's a lot of research and study in cults, you can actually apply that and understand the dynamics as well as the impacts on the victims, and at the same time looking at the solutions that have been successfully applied in cults in order to apply that in parental alienation, and how the system, like as in the government and law enforcement responsibility in serving cult members, that kind of thing should also be applied in parental alienation. Okay, so let's talk about thank you so much. Paula agreed that parental alienation is like a cult, and Melissa said thank you for all your work in this area. Thank you so much, Melissa. So let's talk about living psychologically, which is the first paper that I mentioned about. And by the way, if you guys wanted a copy of the paper, just leave a comment. I will send it to you guys. And I mean, you can get it online as well. It's available, I think, publicly for free. So living psychologically, breaking the confluential trance. Okay, so in her work, she looking at 4 phases in how to rescue a person from a cult, right? So you need to leave physically and psychologically, and then you need to cognitively understand the cult dynamic and cult mindset. I'm looking at this section here. And then the person needs to emotionally heal from the harm that was caused, and then also recognize that they are healed, that they are back to themselves. Similarly, when you look at parental alienation, there's also need to be all of these phases, right? Where the child needs to be able to leave then free from the control, the physical and psychological control of the alienator. And the child also needs to understand the dynamics and the mindset of how damaging that environment was for the child, and be able to emotionally heal from the harm that was caused, as well as being able to recognize that the child is healed. And so in this particular paper, this paper here that we're talking about, she's talking about the phase 1, which is how to leave psychologically. And so she delved into the psychology of the cult. So one of the aspects that I particularly wanted to talk about is confluence. So she talked about the definition of self, right, is a person have this there's 2 aspects of self, which is here, like personality is a verbalizable aspect of individual. So you can describe the person, right? The person can say, oh, I like the color blue, I like Asian food, etc., right? That's thing that you can express. And then there's an internal self where it's harder to describe, right? And then there's a boundary. There's an internal self, and then there's a boundary that is protecting self from the outside world, right? And the problem is, in a cult, this boundary, there's an interruption of the contact, the interruption of this boundary. And so let's just keep going. I'm not gonna read everything. I'm just gonna talk to you guys the summarize, the highlight of it. So what it is when it comes to a cult, the boundary, there's a violation of this boundary. So the cult culture and the cult leaders and other members don't respect this sense of identity. So they interrupt this boundary of self-identity, and then they use a number of things. And one of the aspects that she talked about is called confluential trance, which is trance is what they call is an altered state. So it's like you being hypnotized, right? So you're no longer truly conscious, you lose your sense of self-identity. So I thought it was interesting where she talked about this concept. So for example, when we eat food, in order for food to work properly, the food need to be able to be broken down, like digested within our system, right? And then once it's digested, right, the nutrient go into our body and it become part of our body, right? So it's the same with information or ideology in a cult. When it go not in a cult, in general, like any concept or any information, when it go into us, in order for it to be properly become a part of us, which is our self-identity. So for example, you believe in integrity, right? So in order for it to be truly your identity, you take that concept and you digest it just like food, and you break it down, and then it become a part of you, and you believe that integrity is important, right? But in cult, it's like food that's not digestible, right? So the food is going in, and when the food is not digestible, it sits there within your system, and so for example, if you happen to eat a piece of wood, right, it is not digestible, then your body have to either throw it out, like we want to throw up, or you have to kind of get rid of it somehow. And so your body digests it very painfully. And that's the concept that she's talking about. So the same with cult ideologies being pushed into the cultists, the members of the cult, and is not allowed, because these ideologies are not, people are not allowed to question, people are not allowed to comprehend these ideas. They are forced to accept the ideology without questioning, right? In cult, it's like, okay, this is fact, and you have to take it as, this is, whatever I tell you is fact, you have to take it as fact. And you're not allowed to question it, you're not allowed to be able to think about it critically. So it's like food that not being able to digest. It's sitting there, and so now it doesn't break down, and it doesn't become truly a part of your self identity. What it is when it come out, it's the outer sense of identity. So even though you might repeating what the cult leader said, or whatever the cult members said, you know, the ideology of the cult, you're repeating it, but it's not your true self identity. It's the pseudo identity. Okay, I hope that's not too confusing. Please let me know if you have questions. So anyway, so one of the big things that she believed that the cult used is actually the information, the mechanism or the psychology or the processes that was discussed in the book that I mentioned. I'm going to share screen with you guys. In the book Influence by Dr. Cialdini, this book here. And so, give me a second. Sorry, I wanted to find my note. So this book here, Influence, and it's talking about psychology of persuasion. So the paper about Confluential Trance is believing that the cult leaders and the cult member using social engineering, that using the principle of the book in that mentioned in the book Influence. I'm sorry, I need to find my note, because otherwise I won't remember. I don't want to forget important points that I wanted to bring up. So okay, so in the book Influence, it discussed 6 principles of how someone influence or using social engineering. Okay, let me get it. I have it. Okay, so these are 6 fundamental principles that was discussed in Influence, and that's what she believed is used in Confluential Trance in brainwashing. Is one of them is called reciprocity. How do you say it? Reciprocal principle. So basically, if someone do you a favor, being nice to you in a certain way, you feel obligated to return that favor, right? So you feel obligated when they ask for help, or when they ask you to do something. And so the point of this, now I lost the questions. I'm so sorry. Things such as window. Oh, it is right here. I'm sorry. Yeah, let me know question. I saw Melissa, is this the same lady that you were talking online around 1 year ago? No, around 1 year ago, I interviewed Dr. Yanya Lalich. Now, Dr. Lalich is also an expert in the cult culture, and she wrote this incredible book. I think it's called Bounded Choice, and a few other books and a lot of research. And that's great work. And in there, she's talking about, and I'm happy to go through that another time, but also many of these dynamic. But let me go back to this paper about Confluential Trance. So talking about 6 principles in the book Influence, is one is reciprocal principle, is that people feel obligated to return favors and gestures, right? To feel obligated to, so if someone, and this is what cult culture do, is that they try to be nice to the new members, so that the new members feel obligated. And similarly, in parental alienation, you will see that alienators sometimes will buy the alienated children love by, bribing them, spoiling them with, buying them toys and gifts and taking them out um, to to fancy places and things like that, right? And love bombing, right? This sort of thing. So that's the principle. The next one is called commitment and consistency. So if this principle is about if you can get someone to commit on a small act of commitment, like let's say if you can get someone to agree on something small, they will likely to agree to something bigger because they want it to be consistent. So, if they agree with you on something small, the chance of getting that expanded is much higher. So this is the principle that they use in the confluential trance, which is also something we see in children, is that at first they get the alienators were trying to get the children to participate in small act of rejection to you. And that's why we see parental alienation doesn't often just happen like black and white like this. It's a whole campaign, right? It started out with the children a little bit cold and a little bit rude to you, but based on this psychology, this psychological process, but because of commitment and consistency, at first the children kind of a little bit cold to you. Eventually, alienators is able to get the children to completely reject you, and it's because of this dynamic. The next one is called social proof. So when people look at other people and see, oh, other people doing the same thing, so that must be the right thing, and then they also pick up the same behaviors and the same beliefs and things like that, right? So we see this in alienation. So especially if there's step parents involved, and this is why we also see that younger children, so if you have multiple children, usually the oldest child is alienated by the alienator themselves, but the younger children are usually often influenced by the older children, because these younger children, this is the concept of social proof, right? Seeing that the older sibling is behaving certain way to the targeted parents, so now the younger children think that that's appropriate and that's what I should follow. I should do the same thing. And this is why you will see that alienators sometimes surround themselves with what we would call the flying monkeys, the step parents and the friends and family. They will pull in among them this whole community to create social proof, right? Another principle also in the book Influence is called liking. So we are more likely to be persuaded by people that we know, like, and trust, right? So they will build a rapport and a common ground, and using compliments. So again, back to the love bombing. And obviously alienators are often one of the parents. Sometimes it could be grandparents, it could be other people, but or step parents, right? So they use way to create this sense of liking. So the children like, and I mean, very often children love the alienators. It started from there, right? And then so they use this love to influence the children. And then another aspect is authority. Authority is we tend to naturally follow and respect authority figures, right? So in parental alienation, we see this obviously because alienators often is the parent, right? So naturally we have that authority. The alienators have that authority, and alienators, and then biologically we also have a natural tendency for age hierarchy, right? So age is also giving the alienators authority, because usually children are younger than the alienators, so therefore also giving more authority. So then children are more obligated to follow the order and respect the alienators. Another principle is called scarcity. So people tend to value and desire things that are limited and scarce. So this is why sometimes you will see the alienators withholding love, and this is a way of trying to make the children feel like, oh, if I somehow being nice to my alienated parents, I will be blocked from the love and affection by the alienator, the alienating parents, right? So, but in the meanwhile, the alienated parents are full of love and unconditional love. So the children doesn't feel this sense of scarcity. And so the children are more bounded to the alienators. Okay, so I do see a lot of things, a lot of question. I'm sorry. Okay, so how are these alienators able to alienate, brainwash intelligent adults in their families the way children are? For example, their spouse. Okay, that's a very good question actually. And actually, we're gonna talk next or very soon about the other book, the second publication, which is actually, yeah, we're gonna talk about it right now. Actually, the book Freedom of Mind, and we'll talk about that in a second. Where there's a model that he talked about called BITE model. So we'll break that down. And that, I think, addressed a lot of that question that you just asked. And then Melissa said, thank you. I see Octavia said, what's the best way to reverse brainwashing? Now, that's a whole big other thing too. I think the first step is to understand the dynamics of brainwashing. So this is why we have this session, because I wanted to talk about understanding the social psychology of brainwashing first, because you can't reverse something that you don't understand. So once you understand that, you will be able to apply the principle that has been successfully used in cults to reverse the brainwashing in parental alienation. We'll touch on it a little bit, and then we'll do more in other session. And then Melissa said, keep away from the brainwasher. And yes, exactly right. And so that's why that first publication that we just talked about is talking about leaving psychologically and physically, right? You need to, and the same with alienation, especially in cases of severe parental alienation, reunification therapy. There's a lot of this discussion that we talk about. I mean, everyone that I have interviewed, from Ashish Joshi to Dr. Crook, and all these people that I've been interviewing, they all talk about how important it is that the children have to be freed from the control of the brainwasher, the alienators. And then Matthew asked, how does the attachment system play into this? Attachment theory is a very good discussion, and let's have that discussion another day. I wanted to cover these 5 publications today because I thought they all kind of go relevant together, talking about the cultic culture and the application, and then we'll talk about attachment, because that I have a lot of thoughts into that as well. But okay, so the second one that I wanted to talk about is this book here. Let me share that with you guys. This one is called Freedom of Mind. And so this book by Dr. Hassan, like we mentioned earlier. Now, so this book, let me go back to my notes. Oh my God. Every time I want to find it, it runs somewhere. Where does it go? Okay, found it. All right. So, freedom of mind, there are 2 things that I wanted to touch on in this book. One of the things that he talked about, and he talked about is a tool that used to identify and understand the control tactic in a cultic culture, and he called it BITE model. And BITE stand for 4 mechanism of control in cultic culture, and I think these 4 mechanisms apply exactly in parental alienation. So the first control mechanism is called behavior control, right? This aspect involves regulating and dictating certain behavior and certain action is that it's considered allowed or not, or acceptable or not. And that could be from what social interaction and all type of behaviors, right? So behavior control, and we see this very much in parental alienation, right? So we see this in like children are not allowed. Like if the children are so there's a lot of study in the alienating behaviors that talk about, for example, or many interviews that I did of the adult children of parental alienation that talk about their childhood, right? So if, for example, the child come home from spending time with you, having an amazing time with you, coming to you, to the alienator's household, and then when the child talk about you positively, they would scold at the child or ignore the child or treating the child in a certain way, that the child then understand that it's not acceptable to behave that way, meaning it's not acceptable to talk positively about the targeted parents, right? So behavior control is a very big aspect of it. Okay, the second part of the BITE model, so BITE, right? B stands for behavior control. The second aspect is information control, right? Information control, we see that a lot in parental alienation, right? Where alienators will provide false information about the targeted parents, telling, like bad mouthing about the target parents to the children. And the question Barbara asked earlier about how do these alienators have the power to influence adults, like for example their spouse, is because the step parents don't have any direct contact, so don't have access to direct information about the targeted parents. So they will hear whatever the story. So, they will hear, and actually this is the situation I see. There's this particular case that I did investigation in, and you guys seen, I interview the mother in the case, which is the targeted parent, where it's a very tragic case. At the end of the case, the alienator actually killed the child. And one of the things that was so tragic about the case is that when I interview the whole community around this child, like, teachers, friends, neighbors, everyone had the wrong information about the target parent, like the mother. Some people think that the mother is a hooker. Some people think that the mother is a drug dealer. Some people think that the mother simply abandoned the child, doesn't want anything to do with the child. Some people think that the mother is homeless because the alienator, the father, has bad mouthing and throwing all sort of false information and false narrative to this community of people. And this is why he was able to influence and manipulate the adults, because these adults, the neighbors and the friends and the family, they don't know. So they assume that in the meanwhile, he blocked access. And so because of that, these people don't have information about the mother. And in the meanwhile, the mother is desperately trying to get custody of the child, trying to get contact with the child, trying to pick up the child from school. And yet the father did everything to block that. So he controlled the information. And obviously this applied to the child, the father, the same with me. I was told that my father wanted nothing to do with me, that my father abandoned me. And that's just all false information. So the control of the phone is false information. Like my father tried to reach out to me. He wrote to me. He tried to send presents. Things like that. So the same with parental alienation, we see this a lot. Control of information is a big aspect of it. Now, the third element of the BITE model, so BITE, remember that, BITE, so B for behavioral control, and then I for information control, and T is for thought control. Thought control is to do with manipulation of belief and thoughts and perception. And they use many tactics. So, for example, thought stopping techniques, so making comments like, stop talking about it, stop thinking that way, right? Or discouraging critical thinking, and then encouraging black and white thinking, using loaded language or thought terminating cliche. And so they do everything to control the thought of the cult members. And the same with alienators, they do everything to control the thought of the children. And when you think about children who, and if you guys have seen the 2 interviews that I did with experts in the field of child memory and suggestibility of children memories, right? So alienators do all sort of things to distort memory and create false memories about targeted parents. And so then that influences the thought of the children have about the targeted parents and the experience they had with the targeted parents. And so thought control is a very big aspect, and this is why alienator is able to brainwash the child, right? And so BITE, so the third one is T, and then the last one is E is for emotional control, right? So one of the big thing about emotional control is the instability of the emotional status, right? So sometimes and that's one of the big thing about psychological abuse, is that abuser will alternating between love bombing and devaluating and attacking the victim emotionally. So love bombing, where they compliment the victim so that making the victim feel amazing, and then at the same time attacking right in between, they intermittently will attack the victim emotionally. So this is the same thing that happened to children, is that the children, the instability in that emotional status, the emotional relationship between the child and the alienator, actually makes the child to be trauma bonded. This is a term that this is the process this is a dynamic that's well known in psychology. Trauma bonding is that even though the alienator is abusive to the child is still attached to the alienator, because they long for that love bombing, how good it feels in those moments, and they felt like it's their fault when they're being personally attacked. And if they could just do more, if they could devote more, if they show more commitment by rejecting you, by being nasty to you, by refusing to have a relationship with you, then they are showing more commitment, and therefore they can get back to that sense of stability in emotionally. Another aspect of emotional control is by fear-based manipulation, right? So alienators will or guilt induction or shaming, right? So using these alienating behaviors where they make the child feel like, oh, if the child go to the target parent, because they make the target parents look scary, dangerous, unreliable, unsafe, right? So it creates this sense of fear in the child. So then that will make the child feel more attached to the alienators. And so I thought this model applied, the model called Bites model by Dr. Hassan, apply in code, but it applied directly to parental alienation as well. Okay, so BITE stand for behavioral control, I stand for information control, T for thought control, and E for emotional control. And one of the things that he said in his view that is most powerful in the social dynamic of a cult is what he called phobia induction. And this I also do see in parental alienation. I'm not sure if it is the most powerful aspect of parental alienation, but definitely it's an important aspect of parental alienation. So let me talk about it a little bit. Phobia induction is about installing fear, installing deliberate creation of fear in the victim, so that makes the victim feel like they have no choice but be stuck to the alienators. And we'll see this by creating sense of fear of the target parents, and that, like we just talked about. So the child, and we're talking about children, a lot of the time parental alienation happen at a very young age, where the child is not able to care for themselves, obviously, financially, physically, and so if the child has been told that the target parents doesn't want anything to do with the child, and that the target parents is dangerous, the child obviously have that fear of the target parents, and then at the same time have the fear that, okay, if I don't commit and being loyal to the alienator, the alienating parent, I'd be on the street, I'd be homeless, I won't be able to take care of myself. So I have, because of this fear induction, I have to commit to the alienator. And then there's also fear of, and then also obviously the child, because love in the alienator's environment is conditional love, right? So the child knows that the child can only be loved, and affection is only dispensed when the child behaves a certain way, right? So there's that fear of not being able to get the love and affection, so the child behaves a certain way. So he talked about these three aspects of phobia or fear is, fear of the outside world, fear of leaving the group, the cult group, or the fear of failure or rejection. So all of this we see in parental alienation. And I do see more questions. Thank you. Please feel free to add more questions, and I will try to go through it soon. So that I thought was a very good model that can be applied from the cultic culture into parental alienation. So that's the second book that we talk about. This book here, Freedom of Mind. is a bite model. Okay, the third one that I want to talk about is helplessness. And this book is talking about the particular aspect that I wanted to talk about is learned self helplessness. Okay, so learned self helplessness is this perceived state of mind that you are helpless, that you have no power, that you have no control over whatever it is, circumstances in life and things like that. And so you have if you apply this to parental alienation, and in his book he's talking about the factors that impact this sense of learned self helplessness, is that, for example, if children that have gone through childhood trauma and adverse life experiences also makes them, but one of the big thing is the repeat exposure to negative events where people are not able to control the outcome of the event, right? So we see this a lot in children. So for example, because children, sometimes children may want to go to you. Children wanted to go to the target parents because they still love you and they still want a relationship with you. Also, children still have positive experience with you, but alienators will go in and interfere and blocking the contact or filing false allegation so that they can get custody and prevent you from being able to access the child. So this is circumstances that are outside of the control of the child, right? So when the child is repeatedly being exposed to these events, the child then learn that they have no control, and they felt this sense of helplessness. And this is why it become something that is ingrained, so that when the child, even as an adult or later on in life, when the child do have power, the child doesn't recognize that, because that's the learned self helplessness, because the child felt like it's stuck in their brain, that subconsciously, and so they don't take action. So even though as an adult, the child may live alone, even, or maybe still in the same household with the alienator, the child still doesn't recognize the impact that parental alienation have caused on their lives. Matthew said courts are much to blame as the targeting parents. Yes, courts and the system, not just the court, like the social system, teachers, the whole system, and society very much. And I'm working on this particular research talking about the anatomy, and I will share with you guys the finding of that research soon. But when you look at the anatomy or the structure of parental alienation, all these different components have a lot of different, each of them play a role in parental alienation, and a lot of it to do with participating or enabling parental alienation, and it's very tragic. Okay, so let's continue with our discussion. So that was the second book about helplessness. And so two things that I wanted to highlight from this book, like that I just talked about, I want to just highlight. One thing is that helplessness is something happen when and it's stuck and it become a concept of learned self helplessness when the child is being repeatedly exposed to negative events that the child is not able to control or influence the outcomes. And this is something that happened with two parental alienation. So when the child, even though wanted to fight for you, wanted to be with you, or to be with the targeted parent, to be with the alienated parents, the child is not able to control that, because the alienators is preventing the child, is controlling the child, so the child doesn't have power. And when that type of event is repeated over time, it become a very deep part of the subconsciousness in the child. And so, and then vulnerability aspect of it is to do with critical thinking and to do with, experience in trauma and things like that. And when your child is going through the fact that you guys are divorced or separated, And that kind of environment in itself is already an impact on the child vulnerability to the learned helplessness. I apologize, my pronunciation is terrible. Okay, so the next publication I want to talk about is cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance is a theory that was proposed in the 60s. So this book is in 1957. It's a great book, and it's still very much well established today, very much used today everywhere. So cognitive dissonance theory is a theory that highlights the innate drive for cognitive consistencies. And so let's talk about what that is. Is that we have, like, let's say we have certain beliefs and certain thoughts. We very much like to have consistency, meaning that we want things around us to agree with us in that. So, you know, if I like oranges and people around me like oranges, I enjoy that. And if there are newspaper article talking about how oranges are healthy, it's very comfortable, right? So as human being, we have this innate drive for cognitive consistency. We want other people to agree with it. We want information around to conform with it, that kind of things. So if I see, let's say an article that talk about, oh, orange is really bad for you. It causes all sort of diseases and illness. It causes discomfort. And because it creates this inconsistency within my cognitive framework, and that's called cognitive dissonance. So this theory is talking about when we encounter information or situations that challenge our existing belief or attitude, we will feel discomfort. And so as an innate drive for consistency, we wanted to reduce this discomfort and to restore the consistency, right? So there are several ways of doing this. You either adjust our belief system, right? Let's say I read the paper about the orange and see, oh, okay, it's bad for you because X, Y, and Z. Let's say it have too much sugar or whatever, right? I'm making things up. I'm not saying this is correct, but just as an example, maybe I read the article, look at all the information and data and go, oh, that makes sense. Okay, I'm agreeing with that. So I adjust my own belief system. Then now I have cognitive consistency, right? Because now I believe that, okay, orange is not good for me, right? So that's one way of doing it. Or you can go and look for, in order to reduce this discomfort and to achieve cognitive consistency, you may go and people may go and look for information and beliefs and people and interpretation that support what you already believe. So you don't change your mind. Instead of changing your mind, you refuse to acknowledge whatever that contradict to what you believe and find everybody else that support what you believe, right? So and this is called the selective exposure or confirmation bias, right? So you believe in something and then you find information and people agreeing with you just so that you feel like you have this confirmation, and that's why it's called confirmation bias. And so that way you can feel like you have this sense of consistency. And so let me make sure I yeah, so this is why okay, sorry. So this is why when children have certain belief and okay, so children love parents, target parents, you know, normally in parental alienation, the target parents usually had a positive relationship with the child. So now the child is exposed to the alienators who throwing a lot of negative information about target parents, saying the target parents is bad, is harmful. The child now experience this this discomfort because now the child is having conflicting information. So the child have to either adjust the belief and believing in alienator or believing in target parents. But because of all that process that we're talking about, controlling of information, controlling of access, controlling of behaviors, the child then have to comply. And so now the child adjusts the belief to believe in the alienator that target parents is bad. Okay, now the child has this new belief system. Now, when the target parent trying to talk to the child, or for whatever the reason, someone trying to say, hey, target parent is not a bad person. He or she loves you and he or she is a safe parent. Now the child again experience discomfort because it's cognitive dissonance. The child's like, oh, that is different from what the alienator said. So the child now have to try to figure out, do I change my belief and believe that target parents is good? Or do I stay with what the alienator said? But there's always this power imbalance between the alienator and the target parent, right? Where the alienator has a lot more power than the target parents. And the alienator, using these bite models that we're just talking about, control behavior, control information, control thought, control emotion. So the child now have no choice but stick to looking at confirmation bias, right? Looking for information and evidence to support what the child has already believed, which is target parents is bad. And this is why cognitive dissonance is such an important mechanism to understand of why your child is a victim that is stuck in the middle. And if you understand this, to be able to bring the child out of that and understand the discomfort and the conflict within the child, the internal conflict within the child, is very important aspect of reversing parental alienation. Okay, so those and then the influence, which is the last book that I already actually summarized to you guys earlier on because it was mentioned in the first paper. This one, the book Influence, is talking about the sixth principle in psychology of how to influence people, right? So I talk about reciprocal commitment, consistency, social proof, peer pressure, things like that, liking and authority and scarcity. So these are the six principles in the book Influence. And so this is a 5 publication that I wanted to talk about today because I felt like it's very much applied and well researched in the cultic culture, and it's very much applied to parental alienation. I'm going to go through your question right now. If you have more questions, please feel free to throw in there. Okay, let me go back to the questions. Where are you guys calling in from, by the way? And are we talking to target parents right now? Like, are you guys the target parents, or who are we talking about here? So that I understand who is watching. Okay, so one of the questions we already talked about, where Barbara asked, how are these alienators able to alienate, brainwash intelligent adults in their family in the way children are? So for example, their spouse. So we talk about that, and if you look at the BITES model, for example, the social psychology that alienators use to influence not just the child, but also society around, right, the adults around. And then we see, okay, Octavia asked, what's the best way to reverse brainwashing? We're going to do more session about that particular topic because that's a very big topic, but I do want to bring up a few things that have been well studied in cult culture, and actually also talk a lot in parental alienation, right? Is I don't think I have notes for that, so I'm just gonna talk with that note. But one of them, just off the top of my head, so one of them is obviously removing the control, like free the child from the control of the alienators. So in the parental alienation, you might have to use a court system or something like that in order to remove that control. Sometimes you might be able to, we do have situations where parental alienation happen unintentionally, right? So a parent just by habit just kind of bad mouthing the child to the child about the other parent, but didn't mean to do it, kind of thing. Like have no idea on the damage that caused to the child. So if you could somehow influence the alienators so that the alienators stop doing what they do, sometime by using the court system to threaten that they may lose custody, maybe by parenting program, maybe by different kind of education, then you could then remove the child from that influence or that control of the alienator. So that's one aspect that's very important in reversing brainwashing. The second thing is restoring memory, right? Because there's that aspect of distorted and false memory. So to restore memories, you have to look at all aspects of memory building and psychology. So you look at all the senses, right? Touch, smell, sound, things like that, taste. So to bring back memory, you're trying to bring out like photo, like images, visual, all of this, right? Bring out smell, things like that, so that you can then remind the child of the memory so that the child can recognize the true memory versus the false memory. Another thing is critical thinking, right? So critical thinking is about encouraging the child to ask questions, to challenge belief. Because if you start letting the child asking questions, so you cannot reverse brainwashing by giving the child logic and information. It doesn't work that way, right? We have to get the child at the emotional level. And so it starts with all these different aspects of it. So critical thinking is not about you saying to the child, oh, what the information you had is wrong, but to get the child to ask question. Like, for example, why do you think I am still here? Why do you think this and that? Why do you think that happened? What does it feel like for you? What do you think it feel like if you were the other person, right? All these different critical thinking. I actually have a list of questions that you can ask a child to encourage critical thinking. For parents that's still in the mild and moderate level of parental alienation and you still have contact with the child, you wanted to encourage critical thinking in the child, and this become a skill in life so that it can apply when the alienator is trying on their campaign. The child will naturally apply it. You don't want to be forcing the child in the situation where you are the subject of it, right? So it's much harder because you don't have credibility in the child's eyes to say, oh, can you challenge what the alienator said? Is much harder. So it's not a simple process, and especially if you can have a therapist that understands parental alienation, for example, where then the therapist can apply this method on the child, then that create more credibility than you just sell the target parent to get the child to ask these questions. So things like that. I forgot some other point, but the point is there's a number of things to reverse brainwashing, and we'll go into more of this in other session, but these are things that have been discussed in cult culture, but also in parental alienation. And if somebody remind me, if I forget later, I will post a list of questions that could be helpful for you to ask the child to encourage and promote their critical thinking skill. Okay, Matthew talking about attachment system. So there's an argument about so attachment theory is talking about how a child relationship with the primary caretaker of the child, right? And there's different format for that, and some are healthy and some are pathological. And parental alienation is pathological attachment, right? But we'll talk about that in another time. Okay. Okay, Barbara said alienators are known to answer text to the target parent as if it was from the child. Yes, yeah, we've seen that. And sometimes it is the child, but the child is talking to you in the voice of the alienators. We definitely see that, right? Melissa said that's true. And then Matthew said, remove the role modeling and instruction that is used to control the child's behavior. Yeah, exactly, right? And that's what we just talked about, is if you can remove the alienator's control and influence on the child, you don't really have to remove that parent. If that parent somehow is educated and train and be able to change their behaviors, and I have seen this, it's not like it's never happened, it does happen, then you are able to free the child from that influence, right? I see Melissa said personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder parents are often the alienators. Yes, there have been studies that show that alienators are often exhibit narcissistic personality disorder tendency and traits. They are not all diagnosed, but they have exhibit behaviors that consistent with narcissistic personality disorder. Matthew said quotes are very much to blame. Yes, we talk about this. Melissa said questioning your own sanity. Yeah, this actually is used a lot in cultic culture as well as in parental alienation. Gaslighting is when they denying you or the victims of the truth despite facts and evidence, right? So then eventually the victims or the alienated child start to question their own sanity and go, oh, I don't think I can trust my own judgment anymore. Therefore, anything the alienators say, I should trust because I can't trust myself. So therefore, I should trust this leader. The same in the cult culture, right? The members said, okay, they have been brainwashed so much through gaslighting and other social psychology, they lose that sense of ability to trust themselves. So then they count on the leader and they commit to that ideology that the leader educates. So the same with alienator. The alienator ideology is that I am the best and the target parents is horrible and unsafe, and I am the only source of your safety and love and care, and what I do for you is the best for you, right? That's the ideology that alienator use for the target for the alienated child, and that's saying that the target parents is bad and unsafe and unavailable and unloving. So then now the child is stuck to that ideology. Matthew said the alienated child seeks comfort through adaptation to the circumstances presented. Yes, so the child is stuck in this loyalty conflict, and in order to survive, the child has to adapt, right? This is why it's so important to understand that your child is a victim. The child has no choice, because if the child disobeys the alienator and show and express love and maintain a loving relationship with you, the child will be punished. The child will be punished in so many ways, emotionally, physically, and in other ways, psychologically. And this is why the child have to choose. And so if you understand this, you will understand that the child is a victim. And so the way that you treat the child, and especially for parents that is still in early stage of parental alienation, like when the case is still mild or moderate, sometimes parents don't understand this. So when the child misbehaves, right, when the child is cold or rude or staying in their room and not coming out to talk to you and behave with you, you punish the child. And it's a natural behavior. Go, oh, why are you rude to me? And then they punish the child. And that actually further divides the relationship between you and the child, because you don't understand the psychology. The child is stuck. So the child have to conform. And so if you can free the child, at least in the time that you have the child, instead of punishing the child, if you can free the child from that influence and focusing on critical thinking, focusing on the bonding, focusing on the three principles that Dr. Amy Baker talked a lot about, that you are a loving, safe, and available parent. This three principles, I actually think of it all the time. Actually, anytime before I talk to my children, I always think, am I be showing that I'm loving? Am I showing that I'm available? Am I showing that I'm safe? These three things that I thought Dr. Amy Baker talked about is so amazing. Safe, loving, available, all the time. Think of that. So yeah, so if you don't focus on understanding that the child is a victim that has to conform to this framework of punishment, then you're going to punish the child for the child behavior when the child has no choice. So that's, and this is why some parents feel like, oh, and the child need to justify, right? So the child trying to conform, and the same thing with the cognitive dissonance. The child is behaving badly to you, the child need to adjust their head to be consistent with the behavior, because the child is forced to behave badly to you. So the child justified it by believing that you are bad. So that's why sometimes something that, because no one is perfect, so sometimes you might do something that's very minor that get blew up out of proportion. And this is what alienators do very effectively, is they look at something you do and they blow things out of proportion and make you so ugly and unsafe. And the child, because of the cognitive dissonance, the child wanted to justify their behavior. The child adapts this exaggeration and distortion image of you in order to be able to be comfortable. So if you understand this, and you can go in and try to be able to help the child with this cognitive dissonance, so that the child doesn't have to justify it a certain way, the child doesn't have to be punished, because when you punish the child, it actually reinforces the image, the image that the alienators use on you, which is you are unsafe and you're aggressive and things like that. Okay, Matthew is from California. Thank you. Actually, I am in California right now too. Melissa's from Australia. Melissa, I heard that there is a lot of movement in Australia right now regarding parental alienation. I don't know all the details, but I heard that there's a lot of changes. Katie, hi. Thank you so much for being here. Rael's from Pennsylvania. She's a target parent. Actually, Rael, you are way more than a target parent. You are a great active advocate in the community. Everyone should just reach out to Rael, because she can help you so much. Melissa is a target parent. Andrea is from San Antonio in Texas. Andrea, there's some great news in Texas. A lot of positive movement in legislation, a lot of really great bills that is very helpful for parental alienation that is passing right now. And it's being enacted in Texas right now, and especially San Antonio. When it comes to custody interference, it's great news for you guys. I see John said he's in Connecticut. Okay, if the children are aging out and the mother will not co-parent, what can you do if the judge has not given a final determination on physical and legal custody? I do not think the judge will change custody now, given it has been 6 years of severe alienation and no custody plan. The children are in the custody of mother. They have no contact now with me. The father, daughter is 17, son's 15. Pro se in court, I cannot find psychologist in US who is expert in relational childhood trauma. Okay, few things. So, daughter 17, son is 15. Okay, 17, kind of close. 15 is not too late. Psychotherapist who is expert in relational childhood trauma. We have so this is one of the challenge, is to find people that understand parental alienation. And I'm not an expert in legal aspect of fighting in court, but I will say that I've done multiple interview of experts in the field, both in court as well as lawyers, but as well. So I do want to say is that there's multiple interviews with attorney Ashish Joshi, and attorney Brian Ledmer. I definitely recommend you to look into those because there are strategies that you can use there. Brian Ledmer actually is very good at showing you how you can get on to some kind of progress without going too aggressively and bringing in experts. So, for example, getting the court to take judicial notice and things like that. So look at those interview and discussion that Brian Ledmer discussed that. In terms of experts in psychology, it's challenging, it's expensive, but I've interviewed a lot of those people. So, but it doesn't mean that it's affordable, it doesn't mean that it's applicable. So I would say, maybe start there, start from the people that I interview. I definitely believe in them. But also look at other parents. Now, in terms of, like, I don't know your particular situation, um, in terms of the reason why you do not have custody yet, for 6 years. So I don't really understand. I don't really know your case enough to say. But I remember one of the big thing about that Ashish Joshi talked about was that a lot of the time, parents don't realize that you have to push for a fact-finding inquiries for it to get to a determination. So like I said, I'm not a lawyer, so I really don't know the details of it. But if you go into those interviews, he explained a lot more. So if you go into our Facebook page, which is Victim to Hero on Facebook, and you click on the videos tab, you can actually do search, and then you can search for those interviews. So like I said, with attorney Ashish Joshi or attorney Brian Ledmer, I also interviewed some other attorneys and a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists about parental alienation. So you could try that. Okay, Katie said that would be great, but what if you haven't had any contact with your child in 7 years and you can't have any access to them because they are on such a short leash and kept confined? Okay, Katie, so I don't know if you're familiar with my story, my personal story with my father, because I was an alienated child. I am an adult child parental alienation, and my father had no contact with me for many years, all my life actually. But he was able to create something that is a legacy that is today still a big part of my life, that is everything in my healing. And this is something that I so if you wanted to check that story out, I talk about this in a lot of different interviews, so I won't talk about it today, but I will say though is that think about the fact that actually children today have access to social media, and the children, even when they don't have any contact with you, they are curious about you. And so it's so important for you to have a big and positive footprint on social media. So be big out there, be positive. Positive, okay? It's really important because you need the child to be able to look at you on social media and see that this is different from what the alienator said, that you are a different person, that you're positive, that you live your life fully, and that you want to be someone that the child respect and the child admired, and that when the child wake up, the child doesn't carry guilt because the child know that you still live a beautiful life, instead of showing that you are bitter, that you are suffering, that you are angry, all that kind of thing. So it's so important. So I talk about this a lot. One is that having a positive footprint online, and then the other thing is I did a talk, a webinar a while ago. So again, go into the video tabs where I talk about how to leave message for your children when you have no contact whatsoever, and where I talk about different aspect of it. So look for that video. I'm not saying that it's easy. It's a lot harder when you don't have any contact, but just know that. And then the other thing too is, if you have a situation that is parental abduction, so we actually had a whole event that I think was like 5 hours or something, when we interview all these different people that actually lost their children due to parental abduction, and how they were able to recover their children. And these children were like even taken overseas and hidden under different aliases, different identity, and doesn't have any access to this outside world, and locked up inside, and they were able to find the child and be able to, so definitely look at that event. I think that event is about interference with child custody and child abduction, and we did that I think maybe 2 months ago or a month ago. So look into the videos tab, and we interview those cases and advocates that work on those cases and what they did in order to recover the children. Okay, I see someone said don't give up. Melissa said, don't give up. I know it's pain years full. I had no contact for 8 years. Wow, that's a long time. That's really painful. The other thing I wanted, there's few other things I wanted to say for parents that have no contact whatsoever, especially for a long time. There are two things that I want to say. One is that nothing can take away the fact that you are the mother or the father of the child and that your love is unconditional. So it doesn't matter whether you have contact or not, that love is there and that's everything. And believe it or not, even when the child doesn't have contact with you, that doesn't go away. Even when the child behaves certain way externally, remember that definition about self that was in one of the first paper that I talk about today. It's that there's this aspect of self that is you can characterize and you can talk about it, right? But there's aspect of self that is subconscious that you cannot verbalize it. And so your love for the child and your child's love for you doesn't go away. It actually stays in that subconsciousness. I didn't have contact with my father, but I was still longing for him. I was really rude and cold to him. I was talking bad about him and everything, but I was still longing for him. I still dreaming of being able to have him come and rescue me and everything else. So hold on to that and know that. Don't I'm not saying this as a superficial thing. Know that in yourself. No one can take that away from you. That unconditional love between you and the child and the fact that you are the parent. Now, the second thing I wanted to say is about self-care. It is very, very rough to go through that. And sometimes parents feel like, oh, what the point in life? Why should I anything? And you destroy yourself and you destroy your life. So it's very easy for parents to say, I'm willing to sacrifice myself for my child. I'm willing to die for my child. But the thing is, are you courageous enough to live for your child? Because you want to recover your child, you have to live fully. You have to live a full life. You have to live a vivacious, happy. You have to be your best self. Because if you can't be this best self, it's much harder to recover and get the child back. And even if the child at some point wake up, if you are not your best self, how are you going to be able to help the child to heal? So all of that's very important. So first is understand that no one can take away you and the love between you and the child. And second, live your best life despite whatever is going on. Because while you're fighting for the child, whether you're taking a break or we physically fighting in court or not, or reaching out or not reaching out, whatever it is going on here, you have to live your best life. Okay, Rael sending a heart hi. Barbara is from Tulsa. That's so cool. Stepmom is oh my God. Oh my goodness. So Barbara's situation is that the father deceased and then the stepmom is emancipated minor because she knew she could not get custody. So she get the child to get outside of the system and then she used psychological control to control the child. Wow, I get it. So the child is out of the system, emancipated, but emotionally the child is still within the control of the stepmom. Talking about evil, because the stepmom cannot get custody legally. Yeah, it's really and so that's why understanding and so that's that paper about living psychologically, because it's no longer about legally, it's no longer about physically, it's about in here. You need to reverse, you need to be able to get the child in here, and that's so important. Matthew said you must articulate a timeline focused on the child. Mudsliding in the court gets you nowhere. Most attorneys will focus on the conflict, which is the kids of death. Okay, so I think there's an interview I did of Dr. Alan Blasky who talked a lot about timeline, especially trying to align events with false allegation. To prove the allegation is false, one of the effective tools is using timeline to prove that. In terms of fighting in court, there's a in parental alienation, there's a model called the 5-factor model to use to diagnose and prove parental alienation. I believe that you don't have to use the term parental alienation in court. It's up to you. It depends on the situation, the scenario, the environment, depends on your team, whether you have the capability or not. But I do believe, though, whether you use that term or not, if you use the same framework, the 5-factor model framework, it's actually very natural for people to, if you can present your case using this framework, it's actually very natural for other people to recognize the problem, whether they see whether they believe in parental alienation or not. They can recognize the problem in your case, and that will help your case. I actually have a workbook on Amazon that's called Diagnose Parental Alienation using the 5-factor model. So if you guys want to check that out, and yeah, in there I use a framework, and I have this worksheet that you can use to structure your case. Sorry, kiss of death. Oh, okay. Rael said April 8th. Oh, is the interference with Child Custody Awareness Day. That's right. So April 8th was when we did that event where I mentioned that we did this really long, I think 5 hours event where we interview a lot of people that was able to recover or find their children, and the method that they use, even though they completely, the children were abducted and sometimes to different countries, and they were able to fight false allegation and be able to find their children and recover them. So yeah, April 8th, Rael mentioned. Melissa said, after 8 years, I have 2 of my 3 back, and I work on being the best version of me. I'm so glad that you got 2 of your 3 children back. That's very promising, because if you have 2 back, your chance of getting all of your children back is very, very high. And obviously you're doing the right thing. And saying that you work on being the best version of me, that's great. I'm so happy to hear that. Barbara said judge granted for the child to be emancipated. Rio said, I hope that the new legislation is going to help parents. And he brought up the example of Chad Reed, which is the situation where it's a targeted parent that was shot dead during a custody exchange. It's a very tragic case. Mike said, after extremely limited contact with my 3 boys for the last 15 years, 2 of them have joined the military. I just learned my youngest will be in for 6 years. I just spoke with him, and it sounds like he made a mistake. Should I try to get him out? I'm not young and will be 74 in 6 years. What kind of life will we hand it? I'm pretty sure he was brainwashed into joining to further alienation. Mike, so the same with in a cult or in parental alienation, the getting someone out physically is one thing, right? But now that he's an adult, it's no longer about fighting in court. So getting someone leaving, it's about in here, right? Living psychologically. Like, how do you rescue and free the child from the framework? So you can't be the one that say you have to leave, right? So if you wanted to get him out, you have to make it in a way, you have to be able to influence him in a way that he makes that choice himself. I hope this makes sense. That he makes that decision himself. This is his choice. This is his decision. And when he makes a decision that he knows that this is his own decision, then he will stick to that. if he feel like, if for some reason, let's say if you are able to influence him and talk him into it, and he feel like this is your decision, he might regret it, and then things can backfire. So I'm not saying for you to yes or no. What I'm saying is, if you choose to do it, you need to figure out how to do it in a way that it is his choice. And this is why I talk about this publication today. So for example, the book about influence, look at that book, right? That's the psychology of persuasion. Those 6 principles of how to persuade someone is so important. So if you look at that and understand that, right? So if you understand the social psychology of what your children have gone through, and see if you can in a healthy way, positively influence a child using similar mechanism, right? Power of influence, to get the child to make their own decision, then yeah, I would definitely highly recommend doing that. If you can't, then it's very difficult, because you could, for example, find a way to get him out of the military. Like, for example, right, if you create a false allegation and contact his unit and claim that he did X, Y, and Z, he might get kicked out of the military, right? So you physically got him out, but that can backfire, because getting someone out physically is one thing. You need to get them in here. So that's all I can say about that. Katie said, thank you so much for answering my question. We'll absolutely go back and watch those videos. I will also open my Facebook from private to public so he can find me. I would love to hear your full story. You are such a beautiful, amazing person. Oh, that's so sweet. And admire your passion for this group, for helping educate others like ourselves, because what you had to go through, unfortunately. I struggled daily that my son was taken and kidnapped from me on his 13th birthday, and he turned 20 in September. This consumed me, is that as his mother, I couldn't rescue him. I still can't, because I still have him under their manipulative grasp. And now my son works with his dad, who owns his own business. Okay, I detect one thing from your message here, and thank you so much for being so nice. I will say this: I'm so grateful for all the support, you guys, because really your support means so much. But I do want to say, I do detect a sense of guilt in your message. So I see this a lot in parents. It's very common that parents feel guilty for what happened to their children. And sometimes parents will feel like, oh, if I could just, X, Y, and Z, like if I just do something differently, if I say something differently, what you don't realize is that it has nothing to do with you. I mean, it has something to do, it's everything to do with you, but the situation is that you're dealing with someone who is toxic. You're dealing with an abuser. The alienator is an abusive, toxic person. May not be physically, but psychologically. And so what happened is not your fault. Don't blame yourself. What you are enabling and participating in is a lot of aspect of a victim playing along, is that, maybe your lack of self-esteem, maybe you don't set boundary, you're being influenced by the alienator in the relationship dynamic, you're not able to stand up for yourself, and that's really not your fault, because of the trauma in your childhood, because of how you were taught to believe of what is appropriate. You also, because you feel like if you don't confront them, maybe they will change their mind and behave better, etc. So because of all these things, it's really not your fault. It's what you've gone through. And so then what happened to your child now? It's the alienators. It's the toxic person. It's not you. And the thing is, the reason I say this is that I detect guilt in your message. And when you carry guilt, it prevents you from having power to fight for your children. So definitely remove that guilt and recognize that it didn't matter what you do. What happened to your children is really the alienators. So leave that behind. Free yourself from the guilt so that you can be your best self, and then trying to educate yourself to figure out how you can reach your children. Now, it seemed like in this situation, the child is an adult and still very much under the control of the dad. So that's difficult, but you can start planting seed for the long term. So like I mentioned about, so there's this concept that people use, dripping love, right? So, finding way of having small little seed that is showing that you are loved, safe, and available, right? Loving, safe, available, the principle that I talk about for parents. The other thing is trying to revise and restore distorted and false memory, right? So like I said, using the principle of touch, smell, like all the sensory, right? Touch, smell, taste, sound. So if you still have contact with a child, maybe through text message sometime, it could be like regular messages, once don't be messaging 5 times a day, but maybe it depends on that relationship, maybe every few days, maybe once a week, maybe every few weeks, but not bombarding the child with like, oh, I love you so much, I miss you so much, you have to come back to me. Instead of also be a little bit more focusing on loving, safe, available, and restoring memory and the bond, right? So if you have memories in the past, you try to revive that in the child by, for example, send a message, and you wanted to show that you're living your best life. So it's like, for example, today I went on a hike, and the smell of these beautiful flowers, it remind me of the time that you and I went camping and we blah blah blah, right? Some things that that was in the child that you want to draw out these sensory triggers so that the child can go. And sometimes I don't know, I think that everyone have gone through this, where sometimes some small trigger that seem very random, that does nothing for anybody else, can bring back this whole memory for you, right? Maybe a certain smell, like you go past a bakery and there's this vanilla extract smell, like it can bring back this whole childhood memory of, maybe your grandmother baking in the kitchen, and it will bring back this whole memory and this loving feeling that you have for your grandmother, right? Something like that. It could be a certain sound, it could be a certain, right? So you wanted to trigger this slowly. You don't want to bombard the child. So you want to look at all these sensory triggers and bring this back in the child. And that's one of the methods that you should look at. And by the way, this is not mine. This is from Dr. Amy Baker. I fought them for 5.5 years, Katie said. It pains me that my son had to live with his dad and stepmom, who was very control, limited, and emotionally, psychologically, and physically abusive. I understand, and that's the problem. And this is a comment that someone mentioned earlier about how the court is very much to blame. Okay, Katie said, I don't have any communication with my son. No phone number, no email, nothing. Okay, so like I said, go back to the interview that we did in April 8th about parents that lose their children contact completely. That's one thing. Another thing is, once you can locate the child, this is a whole other talk. We did talk about this some time ago, maybe like 2 years ago, about different way of reaching the child and building a community around the child. We'll go more into that, but there are ways of you slowly building that contact. I assume that you know where the child is physically, or at least the area, but definitely go into that. So anyway, thank you so much, you guys. Really appreciate your support. If you could please like this video, please share this with others, go into different groups that you can share, or in your Facebook page or other places. We're going to post this on YouTube as well. If you haven't already joined our mailing list, go on victimtohero.com website and join our mailing list. We haven't sent anything at all for a long time, but we have planned for a lot of things that will only go through our mailing list. So don't miss out on that. So anyway, thank you so much. Feel free to put more questions and comments. I will try to go back in and see if I can comment more later. And your question and comments also help me figure out what's important to you, so that I can create the next event and topic and find people to interview and information to share with you. And then I think soon we're going to have an interview of just looking at our events. I think we have an interview coming up about a study in Germany of adult children of parental alienation on the quality of life and the physical and psychological impact of parental alienation on children. I also have a bunch of other events that I plan. I haven't posted, but you guys are going to see that soon. And like I mentioned, I'm working on a lot of different study behind the scene. I will share that with you guys. Thank you so much for your support. And oh, I do want to mention that recently there was a report that came out by the UN, the United Nations, that is so distorted and full of misinformation. This report is so poorly structured, and the whole thing is laced with opinion and misinformation. And then at the conclusion, it essentially said, parental alienation is a term that is pseudoscience that should not be used. Now that report is just full of misinformation. And on the 19th, they are looking to present the finding of this report to the UN. There's a meeting that's coming up. So if any of you guys that have and it's a very gender bias, by the way, it's essentially saying that it's only men that are abusive, and so if any of you guys, especially if you are female, whether you are a grandmother, whether you're a targeted mother, whether you are an alienated daughter, that you wanted to speak up about how parental alienation is real and how it impacted you, feel free to put a note in the comment and I will reach out to you, because I do want to get a statement from you, because I know some people are working to put together some kind of argument to before this report getting to presented in front of the UN. So thank you so much, you guys, and stay wonderful. Talk to you guys again very, very soon.